Hey, welcome to Gaming Without Parole. Across from me is Bryan Paul.
And across from me is the ever-illustrious Mike Zeller.
Yep, that's my name.
Went to the dentist today.
Did you?
Oh, bad news. The problem is I only go every 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when he said the word root canal, Bryan Paul was not happy.
You thought it had something to do with root beer. You were like, oh, sweet.
Nope, I knew exactly what it meant. It was real sad. Yep, had some tears, I think. Like some real sad tears. It's not for sure. It's a we have to go in and see if this needs to be done thing.
Is it a back tooth or a front tooth?
It's back, not all the way back, but somewhat back.
So it'll hurt, but it won't spoil your boyish good looks.
But what could?
Yes, that's true.
What could?
That's true. I feel like with the dentist, you either have to go every 6 months like they tell you, or just don't.
Nope.
Just don't go.
Yep. Well, I only go when I feel pain, which is not advisable.
No.
If you don't have, I was going to say tooth insurance. If you don't have dental insurance, then still try to go every year to get a checkup because I should have. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll tell you. I go every 6 months. I brush, floss, and use mouthwash. And about 2 months ago, in the span of 2 weeks, I broke 2 teeth just from eating regular food and
broke 2 teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yep.
I'm starting to feel a little bit better about my situation.
Yep.
Every 4 years it is winning. Mike, what are we talking about this week?
Well, this week we're going to talk about games and narrative, or for those of you who didn't go to college, the story.
I went to college, and I thought this one was about the story.
It is about this. That's what I just said. I was using different words. I thought we could just kick around a little bit some of our favorite stories and games, some things that we... ways that we like the story to play out in games. Trends, individual, what have you.
Sure. And just before we get rolling, anyone who watched last week's PSP episode, thanks for sticking through it. If you did, it was a rough one. I learned a lot of lessons. Mike learned not to wear green.
Yep.
I'm even now looking in the camera. I'm a little concerned that maybe we shouldn't wear blues.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens.
This is a fairly strong blue. I was thinking that as I was walking down the hallway.
He might just be ahead. But yeah, the audio issues, that's why I get the headphones on. You'll see me wearing these on the Gamescast too. I'm never going to let that happen again. We don't run a professional YouTube channel, but we are going to try to make
I don't think that was a surprise for anyone.
We're going to try to make it as professional as possible.
We try.
Yeah. Look at this fucking green screening. This is the shit.
It is pretty great.
It is pretty great.
It's very comforting too. It's like being recording in a lush forest.
I want to go back inside. I don't like being out here. Are there bears?
That's where I was going to say. That's where the bears are.
Are there bears?
I don't know if you've noticed this, but I feel like probably every 4 to 5 years, a bear just like wanders into the downtown of our city. And
what?
Yeah,
I've never noticed that.
Yeah, no, that
never.
Totally happens every couple of years because of our rampant development. Actually, one of the best exchanges that I ever had with my parents. I used to always go for a walk after work on Fridays, and my parents called like right as I was heading out the door one time, and I answered, and it was my dad, and he's like, "Oh, we just saw that there was a bear walking around in Worcester," and I was like, "Oh, well, I'm about to like go wandering outside. Where is this? I mean, our city, Worcester's pretty big, so
it's pretty spread out too."
Yeah. So I was like, "Well, where?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know." And in the background, I hear my mom yell, "Keep your cell phone on!" And my dad just goes, "Yeah, because bears always like to schedule their maulings. They're polite like that. They'll call ahead of time just to make sure that you're home and decent."
Another reason not to go outside, folks.
Exactly. The bears.
Stay inside and play video games. Also, indirectly related to last week's the Midnight Gamescast topic of the week.
Bears in games?
Actually, no, it was totally not video game related.
Oh.
It was about the animal apocalypse. Like, what would happen if animals suddenly started attacking? Like, all animals started attacking all humans.
There's some play about that.
Well, maybe I should have watched it ahead of time because I went in being like, I'm dead. I can't survive a nature walk. There's no way I'm going to survive if animals actually started attacking.
It's like the rabbit from Monty Python.
The killer rabbit?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's get on the...
Yeah. So, I
narrative.
Yeah. Let's get on the narrative. So to start out with, I brought along my prop of the week, a copy of James Paul Guy's What Video Games Have to Teach Us About Learning and Literacy. If you are at all interested in games... Yeah, no.
You brought a book.
I did bring a book.
I was shaking my head as soon as you walked in the door.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, of course.
That Penny Arcade comic where the guy's just like poking it. He doesn't understand what it is.
Yep.
If you're at all interested in the studies of gaming as like how it affects us cognitively, this is the kind of definitive work to read. James Paul Guy has done a lot of research about, specifically about learning and education and literacy, but he's done a lot of stuff with video games and interactive media, and he's great because if you've ever read a lot of academic texts, a lot of them are terrible. They're not written to be comprehensible. They're written to just sound smart and to impress people. But he writes very down-to-earth, very approachable. It's a real easy read, and it's really interesting. But I think my favorite part of the book is when he talks about game narratives, and he talks about how... video games are a really neat medium because there's really two stories in every game. There's the story that the developers created. You know, in Super Mario Brothers, you're going to save Princess Toadstool. Yeah. You know, Castlevania, you're trying to kill Dracula. Metal Gear Solid,
God only knows.
Who knows? Call of Duty, is that person darker than you? Time to shoot him.
Wow.
Well, they're kind of racist. Kind of not a very comfortable series to play, but he also talks about the other narrative is there's the narrative that you as the player are creating, which is equally valid. And I think that's a really neat idea because he was talking about how, like, when two different people play a video game, they're seeing all the same cutscenes and everything, but they're really getting two different stories, which is pretty cool.
It's funny that that's how you started because the second line that I wrote down was implied story.
Yeah.
I thought of it in terms of the original Legend of Zelda. It's almost minimalistic as far as that goes. It's very, very little dialogue. And you just kind of have to assume that, or I guess the developers allowed you to create your own story. But yes, you're right. There's Miyamoto hanging out in the woods. Yeah. I think that's what he always referenced when he was talking about Zelda, right?
Yeah.
Like, it reminds me of being a child.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. Yeah. But yeah, it's a neat idea, and I think it's something as the medium advances that we get some more tension between those two things. In older games, they flowed together a little bit better. But nowadays, where we talked about Metal Gear. I mean, that is a very, as absurd and confusing as it is very tightly designed in that Kojima is very specific about how he wants you to interpret things.
Absolutely.
He is somebody that likes a lot of narrative control. Versus something like the Dark Souls series or, Bloodborne or Demon Souls, where, there is a story, but it's really kind of up to you to decipher it and interpret it and kind of, create it.
Yeah, I think, those are definitely known for being more abstract. I think you even mentioned that the Bloodborne ending was kind of on the trippy side.
Oh, yeah. I mean...
Those are kind of your easy outs in terms of allowing the player to make their own, form their own decisions about the way the story went.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking about a few moments, very early on, I guess. One of the first times I remember a story being super prevalent in a video game or a game was I was playing the Info Games.
Okay, yeah.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy text adventure.
Yep.
Now, how much implied story do you think there is in a text adventure? Because I think there is almost none, because all you have are the words that they're giving you.
Yeah. Although it's interesting because, I mean, you could look at, say, a novel, and you could say, well, how much implied story? But I feel like there's, I mean, you can have a lot of implications. I mean, you look at something. This is not a novel, but like Shakespeare. From one production of a Shakespeare play to another, like, they can be drastically different. There's a lot of interpretations you can make in there, even though it's all kind of text, you know.
Sure. I think Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes did it best.
Well, fair enough. Wasn't John Leguizamo in that?
Yes,
too?
he was. Yep, that was definitely for the MTV generation.
Renowned Shakespearean actor John Leguizamo.
Yeah, he's weird. Doesn't he have his own stand-up now? Like he kind of like.
Well, he was a comedian. I mean, didn't he get started as a comedian?
I don't know. I know he has like a fairly recent HBO special that I was perusing through, and maybe it wasn't recent. Maybe I just watched it recently, and he went through like his whole childhood, and like there were voices, and it was a little weird. I don't think he's very funny. Sorry, John.
If you ever get a chance to read his experiences bringing it back to video games, on the set of the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Oh God, I forgot about that.
I mean, reading, well, any of them. I've heard Dennis Hopper has a pretty good spiel about that, but I've read some of John Leguizamo's stuff, and he talks about how they all just hated it so much that they were just drunk constantly.
Wow.
And he was like getting in car accidents with like stuff on the set because he was.
That's pretty impressive.
And like, as opposed as I am to drunk driving, it's kind of like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Wow. That's pretty rough. But after, sorry, I don't mean to like take the lead on this.
Oh no, it's fine.
But the next big jump for me for stories and games after text adventures was like the Lucasfilm, my favorite stuff, graphic adventures.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Which
classic.
I mean are very, very much like text adventures. Mm-hmm. You know, you just finally have a visual representation, and even when you're instead of typing, you're actually just creating sentences on the screen. So I think that is as big as a leap as it was at the time. I think in retrospect, it was actually a pretty small leap. Just adding graphics to the story, and I just remember Maniac Mansion. Playing through that, and suddenly control being taken away from me, and having a cutscene that was happening somewhere else in the mansion. I wonder, my hand's actually still on the screen.
All right,
we're improving every episode. I promise.
We'll finally get one that we're both proud of, and then we'll just stop for it. That'll be it.
Says the floating head.
Yeah.
To see a cutscene about something else happening in the mansion, it was so movie-like at the time.
Yeah.
I was like, this is the future. In all fairness, it really was.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of when I first. I mean, for me, Professor Guy, his work really resonated because I remembered a lot of playing, console games as a kid, and like you said with Zelda, they don't give you a lot to go off of. You know, you have to kind of create character motivation from whole cloth in a lot of ways, and how much kind of depth that gave a game. You know, the ability to it was this act of discovery as you're playing, kind of, because you don't know what's gonna happen next. The story's just kind of all over the place.
Yeah, and it is funny to see that games like Zelda existed in the same place as like actual RPGs, like Final Fantasy. Unbeknownst to me, I love RPGs. I didn't know that then. You know, like I always hated that I didn't own a Super Nintendo, or even really Nintendo back in the day. So I didn't know I even liked RPGs until like the rest of the world when Final Fantasy VII came out, or the rest of the United States. Apologies, Japan.
Yeah, Japan was kind of on that boat for a while.
Long while. Yeah. So like, I didn't realize that like when I was playing Maniac Mansion, here I am thinking, what a revelation, when other games like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest.
Well, I think Maniac Mansion had a bit more of an established story. If you play that first Final Fantasy, like there is story there, but I think their original limitation, no character could ever say more than like one text box at a time. So like you talk to somebody, they'd give you one text box, and then it was like off to the next scene for whatever it was that you were doing.
Huh.
I mean, your characters had no personality. There were a few characters like Garland and Matoya the Swamp Witch and stuff that had a little bit of character, and it did kind of, the weird time loop ending was sort of unique, but compared to stuff that was coming out of LucasArts, or Lucasfilm at the time, what were the Maniac Man, the Fred and...
Yeah, Dr. Fred, there was the green and purple tentacle, there was Nurse Edna. Weird Ed.
Weird
Ed. Dr. Fred and Weird Ed.
Yeah. And the characters, you had Razor and... Sid.
Bernard.
Yeah. Bernard, yeah.
Dave was the main character.
The only returning character in Day of the Tentacle,
Bernard, that's right, yeah.
Apparently they were originally planning on having Razor come back too, and then they just didn't.
That was a great game, though.
Yeah.
I'm glad it worked out the way it did.
Yeah.
But, I mean, then Zach McCracken, expanded on the formula. I mean, I think Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the graphic adventure, for its really, really short development cycle, was phenomenal at the time. It was probably my favorite game for, a year. But Loom, I always... When people ask me, my top 5 favorite games, Loom... by Brian Moriarty at LucasArts, or Lucasfilm still at the time, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think it was shortly after that they changed. That was just... Every Lucasfilm game up until Loom was they always had to have this slapstickness about it, where it was even if it was kind of being serious sometimes, there was always a lot of joking around. In Loom, there were plenty of jokes, but it was finally that perfect marriage where it was not high fantasy, it's mid fantasy, almost low fantasy, probably low fantasy, and just in the perfect balance of humor when it was needed, but only to lift you up out of a dark moment, and with without any of the verbs down the bottom of the screen, learning the different notes. If you haven't played Loom and this is just fucking foreign to you, go play Loom. Can you get it on GOG or anything like that?
Oh yeah, it's on Good Old Games, and
because this is one of the greatest games of all time, and I can only imagine, having not played it in a very long time, that it has to stand up.
It still has a pretty good reputation. You can get killed in Loom though, can't you?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think you could get. There might have been one place.
Yeah.
Where you get killed, and I think that was kind of the
just
thing.
In the Neverhood.
In Maniac Mansion, there was one place you could get killed. In Loom, there might have been one place, but yeah, it's not likely that you would.
Have you played The Dig?
I've always had an issue with The Dig, because The Dig happened just as I was getting out of PC
totally
gaming.
Ruined all the roads in Boston.
The Big Dig.
The Big Dig.
That Dig.
It's its sequel.
It was happening just as I was getting out of PC gaming, and I think it was because maybe we weren't... I don't think we upgraded to CD-ROM technology fast enough. Our hard drives were always never quite big enough, and I think that's probably right around time. I'd have to do the math, but probably when I got a Sega Genesis.
Yeah.
And then I was playing Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm oh, this is awesome.
So fast.
So not story.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I was never super into PC gaming, but it was always kind of there in the background. I played Diablo and Warcraft and some of the adventure games. But it was when I got a Super Nintendo that narrative-focused games really got, huge for me. And
all
those
RPGs.
Yeah. And I mean, now you look back and their stories are laughable anime cliches, except for Earthbound, which is still kind of cool. But
Final Fantasy VI is supposed to be pretty awesome.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's fun. I don't think a novelization of that would go over too well, but as a video game at the time, it was had a decent story.
But the novelization of Earthbound would be...
I mean, I think the novelization of Earthbound would be a bunch of poems or some kind of abstract think piece.
If it was written well, I bet it could be
well,
pretty funny.
you know that the guy that created Earthbound was a writer.
Yeah.
That's where he was like an essayist, and I think he wrote some poetry. And
I only know this because of you, from old Gaming Without Paroles. That's the
I
only,
can't remember his name because I'm a
the
terrible
only
person.
that's ever educated me about Earthbound.
Yeah, but Earthbound, I think that was one of the ones that I actually had on my list for like good game stories. And actually, Mother 3, as much as I didn't like it quite as much as Earthbound, the story was really fantastic. It's the only game that I've ever seen really engage with modernity. So if you can find the translation patch for Mother 3, I would definitely recommend, and you like RPGs, I would definitely recommend everyone give that a try, because it's very good, and it's a very affecting game. It stays with you afterwards.
There were a few moments, I think, in our little hobby that took the wrong turn for narrative.
Yes. Are you talking about like full motion video?
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Nice.
I think
we didn't rehearse this ahead of time. We're
No.
just that in sync.
Yes. I'm more Backstreet Boys.
Yeah.
Night Trap,
Yeah.
Wirehead.
What was the other one that was like Night Trap? It was some museum thing. Shit, I can't remember.
Night at the Museum.
Yes, it was Night at the Museum.
Yes.
Goddamn Ben Stiller ruining video games.
There was like Midnight Resistance. That was very similar to,
Sewer Shark.
Sewer Shark. Yeah, I mean, I could list all of the awful ones because I do own all of them, I think. And that's the problem, I think, is when just because I think technology and storytelling, I think, have always been at odds.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, finally we can use voice actors instead of having to read everything. And then, wow, that got real annoying real fast. I remember playing King's Quest V for the first time on CD-ROM, being like, get me out of this. Like, I want to read. I want to do the voices in my head.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit and wait for like somebody to finish talking and keep clicking through stuff. It was more irritating at the beginning than anything.
Yeah, there's definitely, and especially back at the beginning when they did not have budgets or anything, like it really makes a difference when you get qualified voice actors, because it's funny, you can see projects where they actually spent some money, like Snatcher.
Yeah.
That was probably one of the earliest console games with a significant amount of voice acting, and it's great. Like, you can still play that today, and it does not feel like a rough 1990s game where they got the custodial staff to do the voice acting.
And you're not even joking. Like, I remember Sierra Online, when they first started doing voiceovers, they were just having people from around the office do it, and you could tell. And that surprises me, because you would think that everybody would have a small amount of acting talent. They just have to try.
You would be wrong.
Well, I am very wrong, because I've heard some of these things, and it's real bad.
Yeah, it's atrocious.
And even Sierra screwed up with shit. No. Oh well, Phantasmagoria, I think, is what I was thinking of. They were trying to like digitize. I think I'm going down the wrong road here with our topic.
No, that works. Yeah, I think that's
part of the full motion video.
Yeah, it like you said, there's always been this tension in a way between the technology and, well, not even so much the technology, but between
what's possible.
Yeah.
And what should be done.
Yeah. And and I think a lot of it comes down to as more money gets dumped into games, I think that squeezes out some of the narrative potential and some of the willingness to just kind of leave things to player. And I hadn't even really thought of this before until I read it someplace else, but why put in like hidden or optional content if you're spending tons of money to animate? Like, you want your players to see all of that if you're spending all of this money and time. Which is why something like Dark Souls is so fascinating, because like there's whole chunks of that game that you can just miss if you're not paying attention. I've played those games a bunch of times, and every once in a while I'll be like, oh, there's a boss here that I've never seen before. Like a whole boss with like a totally different animations and attack patterns and like, But yeah, something like those full motion videos games. I mean, they really were just movies where you click buttons, and is that, I don't know if that's really a game.
I mean, I'm not willing to start calling things not games.
Yeah.
But I will say that they are definitely in a subcategory of games lacking significant gameplay or enjoyable gameplay.
Yeah.
I do think that right. See, every time we hit this, I got to check. But I think I found there was a faulty wire.
Oh, okay,
On
yeah.
the floor instead of in the trash. I don't know. I feel like when the PlayStation 1 hit / Sega Saturn, it was finally developers and the medium and the storytelling all finally converging, and people finally kind of getting it, saying we've had enough of full motion video for the most part, and we know what people want, and here's what we're giving you, and it all kind of started to work really well together. It was, I think, the beginning of our hobby growing up with us. And of course, the 3 games that I always think of when I think of PS1 are Metal Gear Solid, which, I mean, is probably still one of the best Metal Gear games made.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if there's any... Well, 3 I like a lot.
See, and I'm a 2 defender. I know not everyone, I know most people don't, but I think 2 is phenomenal, and I love...
It's because of all the man-ass, isn't it?
So there's a little bit of that, yes. Raiden's adorable. Raiden.
Yeah.
Raiden's adorable.
Oh, he's totally your type, isn't he? I hadn't even...
He's too tall.
Yeah.
Yeah. If he was Asian, it would... Anyway.
Ooh.
Hey, Mom. She really does watch these.
Oh, wow. My parents don't.
Lucky you.
Because of all the swearing.
Well, my dad doesn't watch because of all the swearing. My mom watches because, well, she loves me.
That must be nice.
Yeah, well,
I wish your mom loved me, too.
Well, she could. Are you Asian?
Oh, no.
Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil, and Resident Evil takes a lot of flack, especially the early ones for the controls. But for me...
And Incredible Crisis.
Oh, and Final Fantasy VII. Okay. But for Resident Evil, that was the first time... Like, I remember the first time I played it at my friend's house, Mickey Gustafson. You're not watching this, I'm sure. And I was like, holy crap, this is like Alone in the Dark. This is like kind of Maniac Mansion, except you're actually dark.
Oh, man.
No comedy. But this is like me getting to explore.
Now I'm imagining a gritty reboot of Maniac Mansion, and it's terrible.
Let's do it.
Oh,
Let's do it. Come on, Disney.
Disney.
But I was like, I get to explore this mansion. You know, here I am. I take control of a character, and there's guns involved, and there's enemies, and you can die, and it's sort of like everything coming together. And you have small cutscenes, like the infamous zombie turning his head for the first time, and you just getting that, and then he stands up, and it's back to the game, and you're like, oh my god, it's spooky, and I love spooky games, right? So like that for me was the first time I think ever where everything really just came together. And I think the storytelling in that game was weak because most of it came through text.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like, we didn't see an evolution of having to read a screen of text for your story until, for a little while.
Yeah.
Right? I just hijacked that.
No, that's fine. Do we... Because we're getting a little bit on there in time, but are there games that you feel like really just have powerful stories? I mean, as much as we've talked about like the evolution of game stories, and I think you're right, is that the PlayStation era, when CDs really became uniform, is when things opened up for better and for worse. As far as narrative goes within games. But are there games that so many of them are kind of like action movie and anime cliches, really. But are there games that you feel have really powerful stories? Something like a Mother 3 that I feel like it's a legitimately affecting story.
I don't want to sound cliched when I say this, but The Last of Us.
Yeah, I mean, that does come up a lot.
Yeah, that was kind of a perfect balance yet again. And it's funny how often you don't see that
Just
perfect
made you
balance.
feel so good knowing that the Uncharted characters were dead.
But also, I think BioShock, the first one.
Yeah.
Because then that's sort of that evolution I was talking about. You never had to stop and read anything. There were those audio diaries or whatever they were where you just kept playing the game and there was story being told to you as you play.
You know what kind of cracks me up about BioShock is if you read like developer interviews and stuff with Ken Levine and other people who've worked on that game, BioShock was originally created basically around the gameplay, like the plasmids and the little sisters and the big daddies. And which is hilarious to me because if you talk to people about BioShock, everyone's kind of like, the shooting's okay, but it's like the story and the atmosphere, which is funny because that almost seems like it was an afterthought.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's a great story. The scene when you finally meet Andrew Ryan, I would say, is a defining, one of the top 10 most affecting scenes in all of video games, I would say.
Gone Home?
Yes. Did you finally play that game?
Oh, yeah.
Thank God.
When it finally came to PS4 like 6 months ago or something.
Yeah.
And it is free on PlayStation Plus now. So if you have PlayStation Plus and a PS4, go download Gone Home. We won't spoil it for you.
No, we can't. It's so good. It's so good because it does. I went into it, way after the fact, not as way after the fact as you, but knowing
I managed to avoid spoilers.
Yeah, I did too, because I think people actually care. They know how much this game is dependent upon not knowing anything going in, and just the way the story transforms from where you think it's going to go into this other place is. It's really good. And
I just got chills thinking about like that transformation where because it's sort of I've talked to a lot of people about this, and everyone sort of had a different idea about where the story was going, and I was surprised about that because in my head there was only one way.
Yeah,
there's only one way, and I'm just so glad that it was the story that was told.
Yeah,
and it's like a 2-hour experience.
Yeah,
you need to play this.
Yeah, and it's great too because it's not like ooh, we're M. Night Shyamalan and here's the twist. Whoa! It's like it gradually evolves over time, and you realize like, oh, like this is what we're talking about right now. Yeah. And yeah, it's great. That's a really good one.
What about you?
Well, the other than Mother and Earthbound, the cliche one that I always bring up is Planescape Torment, the Infinity Engine game. It came out. It was in that same lineage as like Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale and those games. It was Black Isle. Which eventually became Obsidian, right? Black Isle became Obsidian.
Pretty sure.
I think so. And the premise is, like, you start the game dead. You're this guy, and you're in a morgue, and you're dead. And you wake up, and you have to figure out who you are and why you're there. And it uses the Planescape Dungeons & Dragons setting, which is, like... It's like D&D's excuse to just throw in whatever. Like, there's robots and witches and, like, crazy transforming cities. And pretty much the whole game takes place in this one, like, enchanted city that warps and turns as you're playing. And combat is a lot less emphasized compared to the other, the older Infinity Engine games. But, again, I don't want to spoil it because it's a great game to go into cold. But as you start learning more about your character and your companions that you run into and just about the world around you, it's very, very powerful, and it really it really leads you to ask questions about identity and about what makes us a human being, and it's just fascinating, and it uses D&D. It's familiar yet alien. And the characters are all very well developed. They hold up as well as any of, I would actually say better than some of BioWare's more recent characters, but certainly they hold up among, a BioWare or a Fallout character-wise.
Is that also your recommendation of the week?
It can be. Actually, my recommendation, are we at that point? You think we should?
Well, my question for you, because I didn't really think about this, we're doing recommendations of the week at the end of every episode of Gaming Without Parole.
It's our new thing.
But should they be related to the topic?
I've been kind of trying to make them that way, unless there's other things that really jump out.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's do that.
Okay, so
what's your recommendation then?
So my recommendation of the
we
week
should probably
is
wrap.
is kind of a qualified recommendation. I recently played, I believe it's pronounced Sybil or Sybil. It's kind of been making the indie game circuit lately.
How's it spelled?
Cibele, I think.
I haven't even seen that.
Yeah, it's another game that I think might be your cup of tea, maybe. And it's made by and starring a young woman named Nina, and who's off on her first year of college and has been really getting into playing this MMO online, and it uses live action cutscenes, which I know we just chat all over live action.
Well, I mean, nothing wrong with live action when used properly.
Yeah,
right. Which it very seldom is.
Yeah, and it's basically the story of her falling in love for the first time, like in the MMO. And it's such an accurate like recreation of that kind of awkward teenagers falling in. I mean, I guess they're like 19 or 20 at this, maybe a little bit older than that, falling in love for the first time, and it does such a good job of that. But also because of that, it is a deeply uncomfortable game to play. Like, there were times that I actually like turned it off because I felt like a pervert. Like, I'm watching these two kids like flirt awkwardly, and like, what am I doing here? This is very uncomfortable. I shouldn't be here.
This is why you think I'd like it.
Yes. Yeah.
Wouldn't be awkward at all.
Yeah. She takes her clothes off a lot in the game too. So.
All right. Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to relive the worst moments of your life, then sounds like...
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, too, because, like, this can't possibly end well. Like, right. Those never end well. But it felt meaningful and very... I've heard in interviews she said, like, this is a very, very true-to-life account of the first time, and I think it was in, like, Final Fantasy XI for her. So it's a very personal game, and it's fascinating and very uncomfortable. So make of that what you will.
I'd like to recommend something that we've both played, Danganronpa.
Yes, it's
a digital novel, right? You do get to explore and run around and solve puzzles-ish, kind of basically look for clues. It's also a very uncomfortable game.
Yeah.
But for different reasons.
Yeah. I feel like if you watch some of the older episodes of Gaming Without Parole, you see the Danganronpa 1 and 2 just gradually erode my psyche as I'm playing through them in marathon sessions.
I mean, it's a massive... If you're not familiar with the series, then now is the time to get on board, because Danganronpa 3 will be coming out for Vita and PS4 soon. Probably this year. I don't know. I can't keep up. But Danganronpa is about basically being trapped in a high school with a bunch of other teenage students, and they start getting killed one by one, and you have to figure out who the killer is, or you're never gonna get out.
Yeah, and what makes it so stressful is, like, I mean, there's a lot of games based around murder mysteries and whodunits, like Phoenix Wright, all of those games are, but it's because you're not jumping back and forth because you're not working on disparate like cases and stories and things. It's all the same characters, and they're slowly getting whittled down. So the people that helped you solve the past case might be the victim next time, or they might be the killer. And
also true.
And that's even worse. Like, you have to condemn your former allies, and it's very. It's towards the end of those games, it really kind of feels like a death march.
Yeah, it's tough to get through. They are very depressing, which I love. But there's also a lot of reading, which, I mean, in my games, I don't love that. But after a while, you kind of forget you're reading. They're really well done. They're really well written.
Yeah, the voice acting's pretty good too.
The art is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think it's a very distinct art style, which is awesome. All the blood is like this neon pink. And after
Which
a while,
I didn't like at first, but now
it gets more disturbing as you go for some reason.
Yeah. It makes it.
When you get used to the idea of blood being that color, it's even more amplified when you see it all over the room.
Yeah, and it almost kind of highlights how alien what's going on is, and then drives it home more, because it's like, this is some weird freaky scenario, but why am I so comfortable with this?
Right on. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That's mine.
Okay. So
right.
yeah, I think those are good. You should play Sybil though. It's interesting stuff.
Nice. I'll look it up.
Okay.
All right.
So
this is episode 40, by the way.
Nice.
40
Woo!
episodes of Gaming Without Parole.
Do we have our
what a long, strange trip it's been.
Yeah. Do we have our mid show crisis now? Or are we gonna start bringing in much young? Well, you bring in much younger significant others anyway.
I don't know what he's talking about. Right.
Start driving fancy cars.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
I like it.
All right. So yeah, this has been Gaming Without Parole, episode 40. I'm Mike Zeller.
And he's the ever illustrious Mike Zeller. Is this how this works?
Yeah, we both introduced me.
Oh, and I see you later.
Bye.
Bye.